Most people never understand this. They go through life with a very crude picture of themselves. They think there is just me and that there is my bad habit or my procrastination problem or lack of discipline. But that model is far too shallow to explain what actually happens inside a human being. If you really were that simple, then the moment you knew better, you would do better. The moment you saw clearly, you would move with more clarity. The moment you make a decision, that decision would hold. But that is not how life actually works. You can make a decision in one state and betray it in another state. You can speak with conviction in 1 hour and compromise it in the next. You can feel deep sincerity in the place of worship, in the car, in the silence after a talk, and then lose that same sincerity to a screen. You don't have a discipline problem. You may be very disciplined indeed, but you're still not changing. Why is that? It's because you have multiple versions of yourself and they are all fighting for control. There's a version of you that wants to change, and there's a version of you that wants comfort. They are not the same. And most of your life is being decided by whichever one wins in that moment. On our channel, we decode human behavior. And before I go any further, I would like to make a request that you subscribe to this channel to really learn this art of living and really truly understand why you behave the way you behave. And most of you are watching this channel, the content, enjoying it, but you're not subscribing. Subscribe. This will help us to bring much better and bigger content to you without you having to look for us. So you want to know the reason why you feel inconsistent. And let me tell you, it's not because you are weak or you are stupid. And it is not even because you lack discipline in the simple way people like to talk about discipline. The real reason is more unsettling than that. It is that you are not living from one single center all the time. You are not one steady, unified voice making clean, rational decisions from morning to night. You are a battlefield of competing pulls, competing priorities, competing internal forces. And whichever one becomes strongest in the moment gets to shape your behavior. That is why you can wake up in the morning feeling clear, focused, sincere, and strong. And by the evening, become someone you do not fully respect. That is why you can hear something that genuinely hits your heart, something that makes complete sense, something that feels true, and still go back to the same patterns later on as if nothing happened. It is not because the truth was not real. It is because truth is not the only thing operating inside of you. Most people never understand this. They go through life with a very crude picture of themselves. They think there is just me and that there is my bad habit or my procrastination problem or lack of discipline. But that model is far too shallow to explain what actually happens inside a human being. If you really were that simple, then the moment you knew better, you would do better. The moment you saw clearly, you would move with more clarity. The moment you make a decision, that decision would hold. But that is not how life actually works. You can make a decision in one state and betray it in another state. You can speak with conviction in 1 hour and compromise it in the next. You can feel deep sincerity in the place of worship, in the car, in the silence after a talk, and then lose that same sincerity to a screen, a mood change, a temptation, a distraction, or a social pressure before the day ends. That contradiction is not random. It is not a glitch. It is not just human nature, as many people try to brush it off as in a vague sort of a manner, but people use that phrase very loosely. It is actually something that is structured inside of you. There is a system inside of you. Whether you understand it or not, there are forces operating in a multi-purpose, multifunctional way inside of you. Whether you understand it or realize or acknowledge it or even know about its existence, it is there. And the reason why your life keeps producing conflicting versions of you is that those forces do not all want the same thing. Take a very normal modern example. Maybe you can relate to this. A man wakes up on a Monday morning and decides he's done with wasting his time with all this lack of discipline and procrastination that is plaguing his life at the moment. Not in a motivational, theatrical, dramatic way, but just quietly he decides that he's tired of this drifting. He's tired of half finishing things. He's tired of feeling like a loser, where the days just disappear without anything being achieved. So that morning, he gets up properly. He avoids pointless scrolling on his phone. He speaks to people with more presence. He handles the things he has been avoiding. By midday. He feels different. There is a kind of dignity in him that he has not felt for a while. He feels sharper, more coherent, more like the man he believes he should be. Then the evening comes. He's tired. The day has taken something out of him. He sits down just for 10 minutes. One video becomes another, then some messages, then some random browsing, then nonsense, then dead time. And by the end of the night, the version of him that existed in the morning feels like a stranger, and he has reverted back to his old ways. And if you ask him what happened, he will say something vague. I lost momentum. I got tired. I slipped. But if you really examine it, something much more precise happened. A different force took over. The part of him that wanted structure and dignity was real. In the morning, in that moment, the part of him that wanted comfort and easy stimulation was also very real in the evening, but just a different part of him. Both were him, and yet neither fully defines him on its own. His life moved according to whichever one he obeyed. Now let's analyze another example. Let's take a woman in a professional environment, high-paying job. She's smart, capable, and she sees things clearly in meetings. She often recognizes what is actually going wrong before others do. She can feel it when an idea is weak, when a decision is being driven by ego, when someone is posturing instead of thinking. She has insight, she has intelligence, she even has language. But when she wants to say something in that moment, another process begins in her mind. She feels the room, she feels the tension, she imagines how her words will land, and she senses the politics, and then something inside her says, leave it. That voice inside, leave it. This is not the right time. You do not need unnecessary friction. Say it later. So she nods, stays polite, and remains silent. And a few hours later, she is replaying the meeting in her head, irritated, not with others, but with herself. I should have said this. I knew what was happening. Why did I keep quiet, and why do I keep doing this? Again, the issue is not lack of knowledge. It is not lack of awareness. It is that one force inside of her she saw clearly, while another force valued safety, image management, and avoidance of discomfort. In that moment, safety won. Now, take the religious side. A religious seeker. This one is especially important because people can deceive themselves here more than almost anywhere else in any other example that I can illustrate to you. Imagine a person who genuinely wants closeness to his Lord. He's not pretending. He's not mocking the path. He attends the talks, listens to the reminders, reads beneficial material, follows religious channels, saves clips, sends them to friends, writes notes, reflects after lectures, even feels emotional at times. He can feel the tears strolling down his cheeks when he remembers his Lord. And every so often something lands with real force. He hears something about sincerity or arrogance or death or accountability. He's reminded that he shouldn't be wasting his life, and for a few minutes, maybe even for a few hours, the whole world feels reconfigured. He thinks, this is it. I cannot continue like this anymore. I'm going to change. But then when he returns home, guess what? A part of him craves that old comfort again. And the intensity of a few moments ago when he was listening to those lectures slowly dissolves. Not because the truth stopped being true, it's because the reminder was weak. It's because part of him that felt and recognized that did not remain dominant. Another part of him stepped back in and said, take it slowly. Do not overwhelm yourself. Let this settle. You can start properly from tomorrow. And tomorrow becomes next week, and the next week becomes another week and another month. And before you know it, that moment has passed. And another emotional moment that produces recognition without transformation. It just becomes another little episode in his constant sort of life where he's constantly seeking comfort and doing the things that he was used to doing. This is where people become delusional. They mistake exposure to truth for obedience to truth. They mistake being moved by something for being changed by it. They mistake familiarity with spiritual language for spiritual presence and progress. But the system inside of them tells them a different story. One part of them is moved by what is right. Another part of them resists the inconvenience of living by a new, truthful, meaningful purpose. And if the resistance inside of them wins repeatedly, then even sacred knowledge becomes something they consume without being reshaped by it. Now take another example of the aspiring entrepreneur, the wannabe business tycoon, who always feels like he's on the edge of something big. He's always close, always visualizing a future version of himself who is successful, but who never has achieved that vision. He watches content and business models, marketing funnels, reads biographies of successful tycoons. He knows about brand building. He's always constantly looking in the market for the latest AI tools which are going to be useful in helping him build his business. And he's always sort of programming his mind to become a high performer, attends conferences, signs up to mastermind groups, always buying new online courses, takes notes, and he'll have a notebook full of ideas. He'll have voice notes full of plans, tabs opened with future business opportunities. He can speak intelligently about trends, markets, systems, and execution, but he himself does not execute. Or if he does, it is in such small, tiny bursts that never gathered that momentum or enough force to become real. Why is that? This is somebody who has all the knowledge. It's because whenever he approaches the painful edge where action needs to be taken, another internal voice appears. You need more clarity first. You need the perfect brand. You need to understand the market better. You need to protect yourself from making the wrong move. So he continues accumulating knowledge, just like the spiritual and religious seeker who wants to change, but continuously is accumulating knowledge. This is a tragedy in human performance and behavior. The tragedy is that he feels productive while he is doing this. He feels like a serious person. He feels like a man in motion, but years can pass like this, and at the end, he just becomes a consumer of business more than a builder of business. That did not happen because he lacked ideas. It happened because the force inside of him that feared exposure, failure, and imperfection repeatedly defeated the force that wanted to create the change. Has this happened to you? Do you identify yourself in this? So what all these examples have in common is not simply human inconsistency. That's too vague. What they reveal is a structure, the human operating system that exists inside each and every single one of us. There is a part of you that wants pleasure, instant pleasure, relief, ease, recognition, immediate comfort, and fast satisfaction, what we call instant gratification. And there is a part of you that thinks with reason, analyzes, explains, and justifies. There is a part of you that feels the moral weight of things, that senses when something is off even before you can articulate why. There is a part of you that longs for meaning, depth, purpose, and alignment with something higher than convenience. Then there is your body, which turns internal winning signals into outward behavior. And then there is the world around you, people, trends, algorithms, the weather, your moods of others, seductive environments, temptations, seductive social scripts, constantly strengthening some forces and weakening others. This is not poetry. This is how you actually function. That means your problem is not merely that you need discipline. Discipline matters, but it is downstream of something deeper. Your real problem is that you have not been trained to recognize which force is speaking when a decision is in front of you. So you keep treating every inner voice as being just from you. That is the serious mistake. The voice that says, stay in bed. The voice that says, do the hard thing. The voice that says, you deserve this. The voice that says, this is beneath you. The voice that says, speak the truth. The voice that says, avoid the discomfort. All of them are experienced internally as the first person thought. I say the first person thought. You think this is just you and your thoughts. They all arrive wearing your voice. That is why they are powerful. If temptation arrived sounding like a cartoon villain, nobody would follow it. If avoidance introduced itself honestly by saying, I'm about to cost you another 6 months of your life, most people would reject it. But if it does not sound like that. It sounds like self-care. It sounds like timing. It sounds like complexity. And it sounds like you at that moment in time. That's why awareness is so central. Not vague awareness, not be mindful sort of fluff, but real-time recognition of what is operating inside of you. The moment you notice, this is not thoughtful delay. This is fear wearing thoughtfulness. Something changes the moment you realize this is not rest, this is avoidance. Something will change. The moment you see this is not confidence, this is ego refusing correction, something will then change. The moment you notice this is not wisdom, this is the mind helping desire to get what it wants, then something will change inside of you. Because now you are no longer fully inside the force. You are not understanding it. You are seeing it, and that gap between seeing and obeying is where freedom begins. Think about how many of your worst patterns depend on you not seeing that clearly in that moment. The late night scrolling works because it feels harmless while it is happening. Delay works because it sounds intelligent while it is happening. Showing off works because it feels justified while it's happening. Oversaving and deferred living works because they masquerade as responsibility while they are happening. Speaking harshly works because it feels righteous whilst you are doing it. Withdrawal from meaningful action works because it feels safer while you are there in that moment. In all these cases, the decisive factor is not whether you technically know the truth in general, it is whether you can see the active force in the moment. This is why some people live trapped inside loops for decades. They think they are dealing with separate problems, procrastination, anger, distraction here, overthinking, weak consistency. But beneath all of it, the same mechanics are repeating. Certain forces keep winning. Certain forces keep getting ignored. So certain external influences keep being allowed into the system unchecked. And because no one has taught them to read themselves properly, these signals, they keep misdiagnosing the issue. They keep saying, I need motivation. When the issue is inner fragmentation, they keep saying, I need confidence. When the issue is ego defending weakness, they keep saying, I need more knowledge. When the fact is, they don't need more knowledge. The knowledge has already reached their mind, but not been activated in the body to be externalized. They keep saying, this is just my personality. When the issue is that one force has been allowed to dominate for so long that it now feels like it's part of the identity. Once you understand this, you stop saying shallow things like, oh, this is just who I am, and this is just part of my personality. The fact is, it's the same internal force winning again and again. Maybe what you call my personality, in some areas, it's just a rehearsed compromise that you've got used to over the years. You've called this, oh, it's part of my nature. It's just repeated obedience to that particular inner voice which craves comfort, which wants to protect that image, which perpetuates your fears, or which sort of extenuates, which externalizes your pride and arrogance, or just allows you to constantly act upon impulse. That is uncomfortable, but it is liberating too, because if what you are seeing is a pattern rather than the essence of your personality, then that can be changed. You can change, but not by wishful thinking, not by excitement, not by being emotionally moved once in a while. Change begins when you can map what is happening inside this human operating system so accurately enough in order to interrupt it. When the businessman who never launches catches himself reaching for one more course and recognizes it as avoidance, not preparation, that is the beginning of change. When the religious listener catches himself treating another lecture like another emotional experience rather than a call to action, that will be the beginning of change for him or her. When the angry husband, the silent employee, the deferred living high earner, the validation hungry public servant all start to ask not merely what am I doing, but what inside me is winning right now. That is where diagnosis becomes possible. And diagnosis matters because without it, you will keep applying the wrong remedies to the wrong problems. You will try to cure inner conflict with productivity hacks. You will try to cure ego with confidence building. You will try to cure lack of purpose with entertainment. You will try to cure discomfort with delay. And none of it will work because the underlying system itself will be remaining untouched and misunderstood. This is why the framework matters, not as an intellectual exercise, not as a clever model for you to study for entertainment purposes or for branding purposes. It matters because humans do not function well when they misunderstand themselves. If you mistake every internal movement for one unified voice thinking it's you, this is coming from yourself, then you will always remain vulnerable to whichever force is strongest in that moment. But if you begin to see this inner architecture, the human operating system, you will see that there are many forces inside of you. There is desire which wants something now. There is a mind which rationalizes behavior, whether it's good or bad. There's a heart which is like your moral compass. There's also a higher purpose, what you should be doing, what is the truth, aligning itself to the truth. Then the body is the one that just acts out whichever winning force executes the body to, or orders the body to execute what it needs to do next. And there's also external influences, what we call the external chaos of environment, of other people, of other temptations which I mentioned earlier. And all these things start to become noticeable once you start understanding this inner operating system of the human being. Only then you can interrupt these patterns. That does not mean that it's easy. It just means that once you understand this, everything settles and starts making sense. It means that you stop being naive about your own inner battles in life. You stop thinking that your next bad decision will announce itself clearly. You stop assuming that what feels reasonable is always wise. You stop treating every inner voice as trustworthy simply because it uses your tone and you think it comes from you. You become more alert, more selective, more serious. And that seriousness is necessary because your life is not being shaped only by the big decisions you remember. It is being shaped by those small internal decisions that you are making, those internal victories, losses, and sort of determining which force is actually dictating you on that particular day. One more silence when truth needed to be spoken. One more delay when action was required. One more indulgence when restraint was needed. One more distraction when meaning surfaced. One more rationalization when conscience was already speaking. These are not small things. Stack them up over a year and you will see how they shape your personality, and over a decade they shape your character and ultimately your destiny. This is what makes the difference between a person who lives reactively and a person who lives consciously. So you are not one unified voice in a crude way that you have imagined. You are a human operating system with competing powers inside of you. Imagine every single day that there is a battlefield inside of you of all these different competing forces that are trying to win the argument at that moment in time. So your task is not to pretend the conflict is not there. Your task is to learn to see it so clearly that you can stop obeying it blindly. The next time you say, this is just me, pause and question it. Which part of me is speaking here? Which force is pulling me? Which one is about to win? Because if you can answer that honestly in the moment, then for the first time, you are not just being carried, you are beginning to choose. Watch out for the next episode. We will be diving deeper into this even more, because these forces do not only compete inside of you in isolated moments, they form loops, predictable loops. They drag you through recognizable sequences. And in the end, the same outcomes shape your life over and over again. And once you see that loop, you will stop being surprised by your own repetition. And when repetition stops being mysterious, it stops being powerful. And this is where real control begins. As I mentioned before, don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to stay in touch with us. Rather than finding these topics, this subject randomly, we will keep you in the loop. We will keep you hooked with future content which will blow your mind away.